The phone rang at exactly 4:37 on Tuesday afternoon, 3 days before Christmas Eve. I was standing in my kitchen reviewing my perfectly planned holiday schedule one final time when my mother's voice shattered everything I'd been dreaming about for months. She didn't even bother with pleasantries before dropping the bombshell that would change my entire Christmas week. Jessica had just dumped all 5 of her children at Mom's house because she and her husband decided to take some last-minute cruise to the Caribbean. Mom expected me to rush over immediately and help manage the chaos, since she claimed she was getting too old for handling 5 energetic kids ranging from 3 to 12 years old. I stared at my carefully organized itinerary lying on the counter next to the small velvet box I'd been hiding from Emma, realizing my mother had just obliterated my proposal plans without even asking permission. 20 minutes later, I pulled into the driveway of my childhood home and could already hear the pandemonium through the closed front door. The sound hit me like a physical wall as I stepped inside. 5-year-old Madison was shrieking at the top of her lungs because 8-year-old Tyler had apparently flushed her favorite stuffed unicorn down the toilet during some kind of bathroom adventure gone wrong. 3-year-old Caleb had somehow managed to climb onto the kitchen counters and scatter an entire bag of flour across every surface, creating what looked like a winter wonderland of destruction. 12-year-old Sophia sat in the corner, frantically typing on her phone, completely oblivious to 9-year-old Brandon, who was bouncing on the living room couch with his muddy sneakers, leaving brown footprints all over the white fabric. My 62-year-old mother, Carol, stood in the middle of this hurricane wearing her favorite Christmas sweater, now decorated with mysterious stains, and what appeared to be glitter glue. Her usually perfectly styled gray hair looked like she'd been electrocuted, and her eyes held the desperate look of someone who'd bitten off far more than she could chew. "Thank goodness you're here, Harper," she gasped, gesturing helplessly at the destruction surrounding us. "I've been trying to get them settled for 2 hours, but every time I clean up one mess, they create 3 more somewhere else." I rolled up my sleeves and dove into damage control mode the same way I'd been doing for my family since I turned 16. We spent the next hour attempting to restore some semblance of order while the children continued their reign of terror. I managed to fish Madison's unicorn out of the toilet using a coat hanger and some creative engineering while simultaneously preventing Caleb from eating handfuls of the spilled flour he'd apparently decided looked delicious. As I was wiping down the kitchen counters for the 3rd time, I heard Mom talking quietly on the phone in the hallway. Something about her tone made me pause and listen more carefully. She was speaking to my Aunt Linda, and I caught fragments of conversation that made my blood run cold. "The plan worked perfectly," Mom was saying with a little laugh. "Harper came right over without asking any questions, just like we knew he would." I crept closer to the hallway, pretending to chase after Caleb, who was now attempting to climb the stairs while covered in flour residue. "Walk, Jessica was absolutely right about the timing," Mom continued. "If we'd given Harper advance warning, he might have found excuses or tried to negotiate. But when we present it as an emergency situation, he just jumps in to help like always." My stomach dropped as the full picture became clear. This wasn't some spontaneous crisis that had caught everyone off guard. Jessica had planned this Caribbean escape weeks ago and had deliberately coordinated with Mom to ambush me at the last possible moment, knowing I'd be too guilt-ridden to refuse once the children were already dumped in Mom's lap. I thought about Emma waiting for me at her apartment, probably already starting to get ready for our special dinner at Romano's downtown. The reservation had taken me 3 weeks to secure, and I'd specifically chosen Christmas Eve because I wanted the proposal to happen under the twinkling lights they string up in the city park every December. The small velvet box felt like it was burning a hole in my sock drawer back home. The phone rang again, and this time it was Jessica calling from what sounded like a poolside bar. Steel drum music played in the background as she thanked me for being such an amazing uncle and mentioned casually that she'd be back sometime after New Year's Day. Her voice carried that carefree vacation happiness that people get when they've successfully dumped their responsibilities on someone else. "You're seriously the best brother ever, Harper," she gushed over the sound of tropical music and clinking glasses. "I knew I could count on you to help Mom out with this little situation." Little situation? 5 children for an entire week during the most important holiday of the year was apparently just a little situation in Jessica's mind. After hanging up, I decided to help Mom get the kids settled for dinner while processing this new information. As I was setting up plates and cups, Tyler knocked over a full glass of milk that splashed across the table and dripped onto the floor. While cleaning up the mess, I noticed Mom had left her phone on the coffee table with the screen still lit up. A notification popped up from something called Team Carol, and I could see just enough of the message preview to make my heart sink even further. It was a group text that included Jessica, my other sister Rachel, and apparently several other family members discussing various strategies they'd used to get me to solve their problems over the years. The most recent messages were from 2 weeks ago, right around the time Jessica must have been finalizing her cruise plans. I could see fragments about how Harper will never suspect, and he's always been the responsible one, he won't let us down, and this is the perfect time because he'll feel too guilty to say no during Christmas. I realized with devastating clarity that I'd been living my entire adult life as my family's designated problem solver, and they'd been coordinating their manipulation tactics to keep me trapped in that role. Every major disappointment, every missed opportunity, every sacrifice I'd made for family emergencies suddenly took on a different meaning. I spent the next hour trying to establish some basic order among the 5 children, while secretly texting Emma to postpone our dinner plans. Every message I typed felt like another nail in the coffin of my carefully planned proposal, but I couldn't figure out how to escape the situation without abandoning Mom completely. Tyler had apparently decided that leftover spaghetti from lunch made excellent ammunition and launched a full-scale food fight in the dining room. Marinara sauce now decorated the walls like abstract art, while noodles hung from the light fixture like bizarre Christmas decorations. Madison discovered Carol's extensive makeup collection in the master bathroom and decided 3-year-old Caleb needed a complete beauty makeover, covering his face with bright red lipstick and electric blue eyeshadow that made him look like a tiny, confused clown. Sophia had commandeered the living room television for some kind of social media video project, setting up ring lights and filming herself doing dance routines, while Brandon had a complete emotional meltdown because his favorite cartoon was supposed to start at 5 o'clock. His wailing reached decibel levels that probably violated noise ordinances, while Sophia screamed at him to shut up because he was ruining her content creation. Just as I managed to get the younger kids settled with a Christmas movie and started cleaning spaghetti sauce off the dining room walls, I heard the front doorbell ring. My heart sank as I realized who it probably was. Emma stood on the front porch holding a beautifully wrapped gift box, tied with silver ribbon, wearing the elegant black dress we'd picked out together specifically for our special evening. Her face glowed with excitement and anticipation, and I could see she'd spent extra time on her hair and makeup for what she thought was going to be the most romantic night of our relationship. Her bright smile faded instantly as she took in my appearance. I was covered head to toe in flour dust and marinara sauce, with what appeared to be blue eyeshadow smeared on my shirt from wrestling Caleb away from the makeup collection. Behind me, the sounds of domestic warfare continued as Tyler started another argument with Brandon over video game controllers. "Harper, what on earth is going on here?" Emma asked, stepping carefully around a puddle of spilled apple juice that had somehow migrated from the kitchen to the front hallway. I tried to explain the situation as quickly as possible, but every word felt inadequate. How do you tell the woman you're planning to propose to that your family has essentially hijacked your Christmas through an elaborate manipulation scheme, and you're now responsible for 5 children for the next week? Emma listened with growing confusion and hurt as I described Jessica's sudden cruise departure and Mom's expectation that I would handle the babysitting duties. I could see her mentally calculating all the plans we'd made, all the special moments she'd been looking forward to disappearing into the chaos surrounding us. "Why didn't you call me immediately instead of just sending those vague postponement texts?" she asked, and I heard the pain in her voice. "I've been getting ready for tonight for hours, thinking we were finally going to have our perfect Christmas Eve together." Before I could answer, Madison came running into the hallway and crashed directly into Emma, spilling an entire cup of apple juice down the front of her elegant dress. The sticky liquid soaked through the fabric, instantly creating a dark stain that spread across Emma's chest and stomach. Tyler appeared moments later making exaggerated kissing noises when he saw Emma loudly asking if she was my girlfriend and whether we were going to get married. His questions hit like physical blows as I realized he was innocently asking about the exact thing I'd been planning to make happen tonight. Caleb started crying again because he wanted his mother, and his heartbroken sobs echoed through the house, while Sophia's music blared from the living room, and Brandon continued his tantrum about the television. The cacophony was overwhelming, and I watched Emma's face close off as she tried to process the complete disaster surrounding us. Mom appeared from the kitchen, carrying paper towels, and immediately launched into damage control mode, but her approach made everything worse. "Oh, Emma, I'm so sorry about your dress," she said, though her tone carried an undertone of dismissal. "You seem like a very nice girl, but you probably don't understand how important family obligations are. Harper has always been the responsible one in our family, and when emergencies come up, we all have to make sacrifices." I watched Emma's expression harden as Mom essentially dismissed both our relationship and the significance of our disrupted plans. Emma had always been sensitive about feeling like an outsider in my family dynamics, and Mom's comment hit exactly the wrong nerve. "Harper, we need to talk privately," Emma said, her voice carefully controlled in that way that meant she was furious, but trying not to cause a scene in front of the children. We stepped into the kitchen where the flour explosion had been mostly cleaned up, but still left a fine white dust over everything. Emma set her purse on the counter next to a stack of dirty dishes and turned to face me with an expression I'd never seen before. "This isn't the first time, is it?" she said quietly. "This pattern where your family creates some emergency and you just drop everything to rush in and save the day no matter what else you had planned." I wanted to deny it, but she was absolutely right. Emma had been patient through 3 previous occasions when I'd canceled our plans because of family crises that later turned out to be situations my relatives could have handled themselves or problems they'd created through their own poor planning. There was Rachel's apartment flooding that turned out to be a minor leak she could have fixed with a bucket and some towels, Emma continued. And Jessica's car trouble that happened because she hadn't gotten an oil change in 18 months. And your mom's emergency doctor's appointment that was actually just a routine checkup she'd forgotten to tell you was scheduled. Each example hit like a physical blow because I remembered how disappointed Emma had been each time, and how I'd promised it wouldn't happen again. Emma reached into her purse and pulled out a small, wrapped box, setting it carefully on the counter between us. My heart nearly stopped as I realized she'd been planning to give me something special tonight, too. "I've been thinking a lot about our future lately, Harper," she said softly. "Wondering if you're really ready for the kind of serious commitment I want, or if you'll always prioritize your family's demands over our relationship." She gestured toward the chaos visible through the kitchen doorway, where Tyler was now chasing Madison around the living room while she screamed about her wet unicorn, and Caleb continued sobbing for his absent mother. "Tonight feels like my answer," Emma said, and I heard the finality in her voice. "I need to think about whether we want the same things, Harper, whether you'll ever put us first, or if I'll always come second to whatever emergency your family dreams up next." Through the kitchen window, I could see Mom and all 5 children pressed against the glass, watching our conversation with obvious curiosity. The sight of our private moment being observed like a television show made the whole situation feel even more surreal and invasive. Emma picked up her purse and headed toward the front door, leaving the small, wrapped box on the counter, like a symbol of all the potential happiness that was slipping away from us. "I need some time to figure out what I really want, Harper," she said, as she reached for the door handle. "And you need to figure out whether you're ready to build a life with me, or if you're going to spend forever being your family's emergency response team." The front door closed behind her with a soft click that somehow felt louder than all the children's screaming combined. After Emma's departure, the house felt like a pressure cooker ready to explode. The children seemed to sense the tension and became even more difficult to manage, as if they were feeding off the negative energy surrounding us. Brandon refused to eat the dinner I'd prepared and threw his entire plate onto the floor, sending mashed potatoes and green beans flying across the kitchen tiles. Madison and Tyler got into a vicious fight over the video game controller that escalated to physical violence, with Madison biting Tyler's arm hard enough to leave teeth marks, while Tyler pulled her hair and called her names. Sophia locked herself in the upstairs bathroom with her phone, refusing to come out or help with anything while blasting music loud enough to rattle the mirrors. 3-year-old Caleb seemed to have absorbed the chaos around him and wouldn't stop crying for his mother, his heartbroken sobs echoing through every room of the house, like a soundtrack of abandonment. Mom watched my attempts to restore order with growing criticism, as if the children's behavior was somehow my fault, rather than the natural result of being dumped with relatives during the most exciting week of the year. "You're not trying hard enough, Harper," she said, as I got down on my hands and knees to clean up Brandon's thrown dinner for the second time. "A real man would step up without complaining and handle this situation better. Your father never shirked family responsibilities like this." The comparison to my late father hit like a physical slap, especially since Dad had died when I was 18 and couldn't defend himself or offer a different perspective on family obligations. Mom had a habit of invoking his memory whenever she wanted to guilt me into compliance, painting him as the perfect example of selfless family devotion. Dad would have found a way to make this work without all the drama and resistance. Mom continued settling into her favorite armchair while I continued cleaning. He understood that sometimes we have to sacrifice our own wants for the good of the family. I felt the familiar weight of guilt and obligation settling on my shoulders like a heavy blanket. This was the same emotional manipulation that had controlled my choices for my entire adult life, and I was tired of carrying it. While trying to coax Caleb into taking a nap, I noticed Mom had left her phone on the coffee table again. Another notification popped up from the Team Carol and Crate group chat, and this time I made a conscious decision to look at it properly. What I discovered made my stomach turn completely. I scrolled through weeks of messages between Jessica, Rachel, Mom, and my cousin Mike, all discussing different situations where they'd successfully manipulated me into solving their problems. The conversations were casual and calculating, treating my willingness to help as a resource to be exploited, rather than a kindness to be appreciated. Jessica's messages about the Christmas babysitting situation revealed the true scope of their planning. She'd been arranging this Caribbean cruise for 2 months, carefully timing it for Christmas week because she knew I'd be more likely to agree to emergency childcare during the holidays, when family togetherness. Emotions were running high. The messages showed detailed strategies for approaching me, always frame requests as urgent emergencies appeal to family loyalty and guilt. Never give me time to think things through or consult with Emma, and always present the situation as something that only I could handle. Rachel's contribution to the group chat was even more disturbing. She'd convinced me to co-sign her car loan 6 months ago by claiming she needed transportation for a new job that was supposedly starting the following week. The messages revealed she'd been planning to buy that car for months and had specifically chosen me as a co-signer because Harper never asks too many questions and he's too polite to say no once you get him committed. Mike had shared strategies for getting me to help with his home renovation projects, including how to phrase requests so they sounded like emergencies, and how to make me feel guilty for having skills that other family members lacked. He jokingly referred to me as their family ATM and problem solver in one message that cut particularly deep. The most painful discovery was a message thread from several months ago where they discussed my relationship with Emma. Rachel had written that I seemed too focused on Emma lately and suggested they needed to create more family obligations to keep me from getting too independent. Jessica had agreed, saying they should make sure I understood that family always comes first, no matter what. Mom's contribution to these discussions was the final blow. She'd written, "Harper's too soft-hearted for his own good. He'll sacrifice anything for family, because that's how I raised him. Sometimes I worry we take advantage of him, but he never complains, so it must be okay. Besides, this is what family does for each other." I realized with devastating clarity that every major disappointment in my adult life connected directly to my family's manipulation. I'd missed my college graduation party because Jessica had claimed an emergency babysitting need that turned out to be a date night she'd planned weeks in advance. I'd skipped my best friend's wedding because Mom had insisted she needed help moving furniture, which could have been accomplished any other weekend with hired movers. I'd lost a promotion opportunity at work because I'd taken too many family emergency days off, not understanding that most of these emergencies were manufactured crises designed to keep me available and compliant. The breaking point came when Tyler, still wound up from his fight with Madison, started running through the living room and crashed directly into Mom's favorite antique lamp. The ceramic base shattered on the hardwood floor, sending pieces flying across the room, while the fabric shade crumpled into an expensive heap. Instead of addressing Tyler's reckless behavior or taking responsibility for the lack of supervision, Mom immediately turned to me with an accusatory expression. "Harper, this wouldn't have happened if you were watching him more carefully," she said, as if Tyler's destruction was somehow my fault, rather than the predictable result of an overstimulated child in a chaotic environment. "That lamp belonged to my grandmother, and now you're going to have to replace it since this happened on your watch." Something inside me snapped completely. I looked around the destroyed living room at the 5 children who weren't my responsibility, at my mother, who was blaming me for damage I hadn't caused, and at the group chat messages that revealed years of calculated manipulation. "No, Mom?" I said quietly, standing up from where I'd been trying to comfort crying Caleb. "I'm not replacing your lamp, and I'm not watching these kids anymore, and I'm done being the family emergency service." I pulled out my phone and showed her the Team Carol group chat messages, watching her face pale as she realized I'd discovered their coordination efforts. "You want to explain this?" I asked, scrolling through the most damaging conversations. "Or should I just assume that everything you've told me about family emergencies over the past few years has been carefully planned manipulation?" Mom's response was immediate and predictable. Instead of acknowledging the manipulation or apologizing for the deception, she went straight into defensive mode. "Family helps family, Harper," she said with that tone of righteous indignation she used whenever anyone questioned her methods. "Everything we've done has been because we love you and trust you to be there when we need support. You're being selfish and ungrateful for questioning our approach." She gestured toward the children playing the guilt card one final time. "Are you really going to abandon these innocent babies because you're upset about some text messages? What kind of man walks away from family responsibility over something so petty?" But this time her manipulation tactics felt transparent and powerless. I could see exactly what she was doing, and I was finally ready to stop participating in the cycle. I spent that night lying awake in my old bedroom, staring at the ceiling while Tyler and Brandon snored in the twin beds across the room. Mom had insisted I stay overnight to help with the morning routine, and I'd agreed because I was formulating a plan that required me to be present for a few more days. Rather than storming out in anger or getting into more confrontations that would only result in guilt trips and emotional manipulation, I decided to use my family's own tactics against them. If they wanted to coordinate and strategize, I could play that game too. The next morning, I acted like the dutiful son and uncle they expected me to be. I apologized to Mom for overreacting about the group chat and promised to focus on taking care of the children until Jessica returned from her cruise. Mom seemed pleased with my apparent surrender and relaxed her guard, probably assuming she'd successfully guilt-tripped me back into compliance. While preparing breakfast for 5 demanding children, I started secretly documenting everything that was happening. I began taking screenshots of the family group chat messages, being careful to capture the full context of their manipulation planning. I also started recording conversations whenever Mom made revealing comments about their strategies or expectations. The group chat continued to provide damaging evidence as family members checked in about the situation. Rachel sent messages asking how the Harper management was going, while Mike shared tips for keeping me compliant if I started showing signs of resistance. Jessica posted updates from the cruise ship, including photos of expensive spa treatments and multiple cocktail hours that contradicted her claims about needing a budget-friendly vacation. While managing the children's increasingly difficult behavior, I started implementing subtle changes to expose the true scope of the situation. I arranged for the kids to video call their parents every few hours, making sure Jessica and her husband could see exactly how chaotic and exhausting their absence had made things. During these calls, I made sure to highlight specific challenges in ways that would make any reasonable parent uncomfortable. I'd position the camera so Jessica could see Tyler's defiant behavior when he refused to follow basic rules, Madison's constant demands for attention and entertainment, Brandon's emotional outbursts when things didn't go his way, and Caleb's heartbreaking questions about when his mommy was coming home. I also started documenting everything with photos and videos, framing them as fun family memories, while actually building evidence of the unreasonable burden that had been placed on me. I took pictures of the destroyed living room videos of the children's emotional distress and detailed documentation of how much work was required to manage 5 kids simultaneously without any advanced preparation or support. Meanwhile, I began reaching out to extended family members who weren't part of the core manipulation group. I called my Aunt Susan, Mom's younger sister, and casually mentioned during our conversation that I was spending my Christmas week watching Jessica's children instead of celebrating with Emma. Aunt Susan's reaction was immediate and horrified. "Harper, honey, what do you mean you're babysitting for Christmas? Jessica told everyone at Thanksgiving that you'd volunteered enthusiastically to watch the kids so she could take a well-deserved vacation with her husband." This was exactly the kind of information I'd been hoping to uncover. Jessica had been telling different stories to different people about my involvement in the babysitting arrangement, making herself look generous for giving me the opportunity to spend time with my nieces and nephews. I also called my cousin Mark, Mike's younger brother, who'd always seemed more reasonable than the rest of the family. During our conversation, I discovered that the family had been telling him completely different stories about my role in various situations. Mark thought I genuinely enjoyed being the family problem solver and had no idea about the manipulation tactics or group chat coordination. "I've actually been feeling guilty for not helping out more," Mark admitted. "Mike always makes it sound like you love taking care of everyone's emergencies and that you'd be offended if we tried to handle things ourselves." The most revealing conversation came when I decided to call Jessica's mother-in-law, a sweet woman named Dorothy, who'd always been kind to me at family gatherings. During our chat, she mentioned something that stopped me cold. "I'm so glad Jessica's spending Christmas with family this year," Dorothy said warmly. Her husband told me they were visiting relatives for the holiday, and I thought it was wonderful that they were prioritizing family time over expensive vacations. Jessica had lied to her own in-laws about where she was spending Christmas. She told them she was visiting family to avoid being asked to help with their holiday celebrations or babysit their other grandchildren. This deception revealed the true scope of Jessica's manipulation. She wasn't just taking advantage of me, she was lying to multiple people to create the maximum freedom for herself, while avoiding any reciprocal obligations. I started planning the perfect moment to reveal everything I'd discovered. Christmas Eve was approaching, and I knew Jessica would want to do a family video call so the children could see their parents opening presents. This would be the ideal opportunity to expose the full truth in front of the entire extended family. I began reaching out to family members to arrange a large video call, framing it as a special Christmas Eve celebration where everyone could participate despite being in different locations. I invited Aunt Susan, Uncle Robert, Cousin Mark, several family friends, and even some of Jessica's in-laws and neighbors who'd known the children since they were babies. The more people who witnessed the revelation, the harder it would be for my family to spin the story or minimize the manipulation that had been going on. As I made these preparations, I continued playing the role of the overwhelmed but dutiful uncle. Mom praised my renewed cooperation, probably congratulating herself on successfully managing another potential rebellion. Jessica continued posting vacation photos on social media, showing herself living her best life, while her children asked strangers when their parents were coming home. The children's behavior continued deteriorating as Christmas Eve approached. They were missing their parents, confused about why they'd been left with relatives during the most exciting week of the year, and acting out in increasingly dramatic ways to get attention. Tyler had become openly defiant, refusing to follow any rules or listen to authority. Madison had developed a pattern of destroying things when she didn't get her way. Brandon cried constantly about missing his family traditions. Sophia had withdrawn completely into her phone, refusing to interact with anyone. Caleb kept asking heartbreaking questions about whether his parents still loved him. The contrast between the children's emotional distress and Jessica's carefree vacation posts was becoming stark enough that even the most family-loyal relatives would have trouble ignoring it. Everything was falling into place for Christmas Eve when I planned to expose the entire manipulation scheme in front of everyone who mattered to my family's reputation and relationships. Christmas Eve morning arrived with fresh chaos as Tyler discovered how to unlock the liquor cabinet and decided to mix himself a grown-up drink using vodka and orange juice. I found him in the kitchen at 6:30, proudly showing off his concoction to 3-year-old Caleb, who was reaching for the glass with sticky fingers. After confiscating the alcohol and explaining why 8-year-olds don't drink cocktails, I spent an hour child-proofing every cabinet in the house, while Mom criticized my overprotective approach to kitchen safety. Madison had apparently been awake since 5 o'clock, systematically unwrapping and rewrapping all the presents under the Christmas tree to peek at their contents. The living room looked like a gift-wrapping supply store had exploded, with torn paper, tangled ribbons, and scattered bows covering every surface. Sophia emerged from her room around noon, wearing full makeup and a party dress, announcing she was ready for her Christmas Eve Instagram photo shoot and demanding that everyone else coordinate their outfits to match her aesthetic vision. By evening, I had everything perfectly orchestrated for the family video call. The children were dressed in their nicest clothes, the living room had been restored to some semblance of holiday charm, and my laptop was positioned to record the entire conversation. Mom had prepared hot chocolate and Christmas cookies, creating the perfect backdrop for what she assumed would be a heartwarming family celebration. As relatives began joining the video call, I maintained my usual pleasant demeanor while internally preparing for the most important conversation of my adult life. Aunt Susan appeared on screen from her living room in Phoenix, Uncle Robert connected from his cabin in Colorado, and Cousin Mark joined from his apartment across town. Several family friends who'd known us for years logged in to see the children, along with Jessica's in-laws, and a few neighbors who'd become like extended family over the years. The screen filled with familiar faces, all excited to see the children on Christmas Eve and share in what they believed was a lovely family gathering. Mom beamed with pride as she showed off how well she was managing the holiday celebration, completely unaware that I was about to dismantle her carefully constructed narrative. Jessica and her husband joined the call from their cruise ship, looking relaxed and deeply tanned from days of tropical sunshine. Jessica wore a flowing white dress that screamed expensive resort wear, while her husband sported a golf shirt and the kind of casual confidence that comes from having zero responsibilities for an entire week. "Look at my beautiful family," Jessica exclaimed, waving at the camera, while tropical music played softly in the background. "I'm so grateful that Harper volunteered to help Mom with the kids so we could have this amazing opportunity to reconnect as a couple. You know how stressful parenting can be, and sometimes you just need a break to remember why you fell in love in the first place." The extended family members nodded approvingly, praising Jessica for prioritizing her marriage and thanking me for being such a devoted uncle. Aunt Susan commented on how wonderful it was that I'd stepped up to help, while Uncle Robert mentioned how proud my father would be to see me taking care of family. I let Jessica finish painting her false narrative, allowing her to dig herself deeper into the deception while everyone listened sympathetically. She talked about how much she'd needed this vacation after such a difficult year, how grateful she was for my willingness to help, and how this experience was bringing the whole family closer together. "Harper has always been our family's rock." Jessica continued, reaching for her husband's hand in a gesture of romantic unity. "When I called Mom 2 weeks ago, feeling overwhelmed and desperate for a break, Harper immediately offered to take the kids for Christmas week so we could have some couple time. He said Christmas was about family sacrifice, and that he'd rather spend the holiday helping his sister than doing anything selfish." Every word was a carefully crafted lie designed to make her look like a grateful sister and me look like an eager volunteer. The extended family ate it up completely, praising both Jessica's honesty about needing help and my generosity in providing it. When Jessica finished her performance, I calmly shared my screen to display the Team Carol group chat messages. The cheerful family conversation came to an abrupt halt as everyone began reading the real story behind Jessica's Christmas vacation. Silence fell over the video call as relatives processed the manipulation strategies, the coordinated planning, and the casual discussions about how to exploit my helpful nature. Aunt Susan's expression changed from confusion to horror as she read messages about guilting me into compliance and never giving me time to think through family requests. "Jessica, what is this?" Uncle Robert asked, his voice carrying a tone I'd never heard him use before. "These messages make it sound like you've been planning this vacation for months while deliberately misleading Harper about the circumstances." Jessica's face went pale as she realized the scope of what I'd just exposed. Her husband leaned closer to read the messages over her shoulder, and I watched his expression change from confusion to anger as he understood how his wife had manipulated the situation. I continued scrolling through the most damaging conversations showing the family's strategies for taking advantage of my willingness to help. The extended family read in stunned silence as months of calculated manipulation unfolded before their eyes, including specific discussions about how to prevent me from becoming too independent in my relationship with Emma. "There's more," I said calmly, switching to Jessica's social media profiles. The screen filled with photos from her cruise expensive spa treatments, multiple cocktail hours, luxury dining experiences, and poolside relaxation sessions that contradicted every claim about needing a budget-friendly vacation or experiencing financial stress. Aunt Susan was the first to find her voice. "Jessica, honey, these posts show you spending money on spa treatments that cost more than most people's monthly rent. How could you afford all this if money was tight enough to need free childcare?" Jessica's father-in-law, a normally quiet man who'd always treated me with respect, leaned into the camera with an expression of complete disbelief. "Jessica, you told us you were visiting family for Christmas," he said slowly. "You specifically said you couldn't afford to travel this year, which is why we sent that $500 check to help with holiday expenses for the children. Where did that money actually go?" The conversation was spiraling beyond Jessica's control as family members began connecting the dots between her various deceptions. Jessica's mother-in-law asked pointed questions about the childcare arrangements, while cousin Mark demanded to know how many other family situations had been orchestrated manipulation rather than genuine emergencies. But the most devastating moment came when the children themselves began reacting to the tension in the room. Madison started crying because she could see her mother getting upset on the video call, and her innocent tears highlighted how the adults' manipulation games had affected the kids. Tyler asked loudly why everyone was arguing, while Caleb began his heartbreaking questions about when he could go home to his own bed and toys. "Mommy, why did you leave us here?" Madison sobbed, looking directly at the camera. "I thought you were coming back for Christmas morning, but Harper says you won't be home until after New Year's. Did we do something wrong?" The raw emotion in Madison's voice created a moment of devastating clarity for everyone watching. This wasn't about adult relationships or family dynamics anymore. This was about 5 children who'd been used as pawns in their mother's manipulation scheme, left to spend Christmas with relatives while their parents enjoyed a luxury vacation. Jessica tried to maintain her composure, but I could see tears forming in her eyes as she faced the reality of how her actions looked to everyone she'd been trying to impress. Her husband had moved away from the camera, and I could hear him speaking angrily in the background about flights home and canceled vacation activities. Aunt Susan's voice cut through the chaos with authority I'd never heard from her before. "Jessica, this conversation ends now," she said firmly. "You need to arrange immediate transportation home to take care of your children. This has gone far enough, and these babies need their parents for Christmas." The video call erupted in a chorus of family members expressing disappointment, anger, and concern for the children's welfare. Jessica's carefully constructed vacation narrative had completely collapsed, and she was facing consequences from every direction simultaneously. Within 2 hours of the video call ending, Jessica's entire world began unraveling in ways she clearly hadn't anticipated. Her father-in-law called the cruise ship directly and purchased expensive last-minute flights to force Jessica and her husband to return home immediately. The airline fees and change penalties cost more than $3,000 money that came directly out of their vacation budget and left them scrambling to cover the unexpected expenses. Jessica's husband was furious about missing work for what he'd believed was a genuine family emergency, only to discover it was an elaborate manipulation scheme that had now exploded publicly. I could hear him yelling in the background during Jessica's frantic phone calls, demanding to know how many other family situations had been manufactured crises designed to get free childcare or financial support. Meanwhile, my phone rang constantly with calls from family members who wanted to apologize for their unwitting participation in the manipulation pattern. Cousin Mark called first, expressing genuine shock at learning about the coordination efforts and admitting he'd been planning to ask me for help with his mortgage payments based on coaching from the family group chat. Harper, I had no idea they were orchestrating all these requests. Mark said, his voice heavy with guilt. "Mike told me you loved helping family, and that you'd be offended if I tried to handle my financial problems independently. I was supposed to call you next week about co-signing a loan, but now I realize that was just another setup to take advantage of your good nature." Uncle Robert's call came next, and his tone carried a level of disappointment I'd rarely heard from him. He explained that he'd felt guilty for years about not contributing more to family emergencies, never understanding that other family members were deliberately staying uninvolved while pushing all the responsibility onto me. "I kept wondering why I never seemed to hear about these crises until after you'd already solved them," Uncle Robert said. "Now I understand that was intentional coordination to keep me out of the loop while making sure you couldn't say no to helping." Aunt Susan's conversation was the most revealing. She admitted that she'd suspected something was wrong with the family dynamics for months, but hadn't wanted to interfere in what she assumed were private arrangements between siblings. "We, Your mother has been bragging for years about how responsible and helpful you are," Aunt Susan explained. "She makes it sound like you volunteer for everything enthusiastically, and she gets defensive whenever anyone suggests the family might be taking advantage of your generosity. I should have paid closer attention to the patterns instead of accepting her version of events." The most significant change came from Mom herself. After receiving angry calls from her sister Susan, several longtime family friends, and even some of Jessica's neighbors who'd witnessed the video call revelation, Mom began to understand how her behavior appeared to people outside our immediate family circle. For the first time in my adult life, Mom sat down with me for a genuine conversation about the manipulation patterns, rather than trying to deflect blame or minimize the problems. She admitted that the family had developed an unhealthy dynamic where my helpfulness had become an expectation rather than a choice. "Harper, I never thought about how this looked from your perspective," Mom said quietly, her usual defensiveness replaced by what seemed like genuine reflection. "When you were growing up, your father handled so many family problems that I thought it was normal for one person to be everyone's go-to solution. After he died, I unconsciously started expecting you to fill that same role without considering whether it was fair or healthy." Mom revealed information about my father that I'd never heard before. Apparently, Dad had struggled with similar issues with his own family before he died, constantly being asked to solve everyone's problems and provide financial help for relatives who refused to plan ahead or take responsibility for their own choices. "Your father used to complain privately about feeling like his family's emergency fund," Mom admitted. "He loved helping people, but he got frustrated when the same relatives kept creating preventable crises and expecting him to fix everything. I promised him I wouldn't let our children get trapped in that same cycle, but I ended up recreating exactly the same pattern with you." Meanwhile, the consequences for Jessica continued escalating. Her neighbors and friends who'd seen the video call began questioning other stories Jessica had told them about family emergencies and my involvement in various situations. Several people reached out to me directly to express concern about how I'd been treated and to apologize for not recognizing the manipulation sooner. Jessica's in-laws were particularly upset about being deceived regarding the Christmas plans and the financial assistance they'd provided. They'd sent money specifically to help with holiday expenses for the children, money that had apparently been redirected to fund luxury cruise activities while the kids spent Christmas away from their parents. But the most immediate change was in the children's behavior. Once they understood their parents were actually coming home soon, their emotional state began improving dramatically. Tyler apologized for breaking Mom's lamp and offered to help with cleaning and organizing. Madison stopped her attention-seeking tantrums and began helping take care of Caleb instead of competing with him for adult focus. Even Sophia emerged from her teenage withdrawal to help manage her younger siblings, apparently recognizing that the family crisis required everyone to contribute rather than just expecting adults to handle everything. Brandon's constant crying stopped once he had a definitive timeline for when his parents would return. Emma's return was the most unexpected development of the entire evening. I was helping Caleb get ready for bed when the doorbell rang, and I found Emma standing on the front porch holding a small overnight bag and wearing a tentative expression. "I've been thinking about everything that happened," Emma said carefully, "and I realized that I might have been unfair to you yesterday. I was upset about our canceled plans, but I didn't really understand the scope of what your family was putting you through." Emma explained that she'd spent the day talking to her own family about the situation, and her mother had helped her understand the difference between Harper's willingness to help and his family's manipulation of that willingness. "My mom pointed out that your helpfulness is actually one of the things I love most about you," Emma continued. "The problem isn't that you care about your family. The problem is that they've been taking advantage of your caring nature in ways that prevent you from building your own independent life. Emma showed me the gift she'd tried to give me on Christmas Eve, a photo album documenting our relationship over the past 2 years, with a handwritten note expressing her hopes for our future together and her readiness to take the next step in our commitment. I was planning to tell you I'm ready to move in together and start talking about marriage seriously, Emma said softly. I realized that walking away when you needed support wasn't the kind of partner I want to be, even if I was frustrated about the situation. Just as we were having this conversation, headlights appeared in the driveway. Jessica and her husband had arrived home a full week earlier than planned, having caught the first available emergency flight from their cruise ship. Jessica looked exhausted and emotionally drained as she walked up to the front door, while her husband carried their hastily packed vacation luggage with an expression of barely controlled anger. The reunion with the children was emotional and complicated. All 5 kids were excited to see their parents, but they also had questions about why they'd been left during Christmas and whether similar abandonments might happen in the future. Jessica broke down crying as she realized the full extent of damage her manipulation had caused to her relationships with her children, her in-laws, and the extended family who trusted her version of events. Jessica's return home marked the beginning of genuine accountability within my family for the first time in my adult life. She spent her first hour back sitting down with each of her children, individually apologizing for leaving them during Christmas and admitting that she'd made a selfish choice that hurt people she loved. The conversations were heartbreaking and necessary, with Madison asking if Mommy had stopped loving them, and Tyler wondering if they'd done something wrong to deserve being left behind. Jessica's apology to me came later that evening after she'd gotten the children settled and processed the full scope of consequences her manipulation scheme had created. She found me in the kitchen, cleaning up the dinner dishes that had accumulated over the past few days, and asked if we could talk privately. "Harper, I owe you an apology that's probably years overdue." Jessica began, her voice shaky with exhaustion and guilt. "I've been taking advantage of your generous nature for so long that I convinced myself it was normal family dynamics instead of recognizing it as exploitation." She admitted that she'd been struggling with feeling overwhelmed as a parent, but had chosen manipulation instead of asking for help honestly or seeking proper solutions to her stress and burnout. Jessica revealed that the cruise had been planned for months, not the spontaneous opportunity she'd claimed, and that she deliberately coordinated with Mom to ambush me at the last minute because she knew I'd be more likely to agree under pressure. "I told myself that you didn't mind helping because you never complained or said no," Jessica continued. "But I realize now that I trained you not to complain by making it clear that family loyalty meant always saying yes, no matter what you had to sacrifice." Jessica also acknowledged the impact her manipulation had on my relationship with Emma, admitting she'd been aware that her emergency requests consistently disrupted my personal plans, but had rationalized it as acceptable because family comes first. The conversation with Mom was even more significant because it represented a fundamental shift in how she understood family relationships and obligations. Mom arranged individual meetings with me, Jessica, and Rachel to address the manipulation patterns directly and take responsibility for enabling the dysfunction over years of poor boundary setting. "I raised you children to prioritize family loyalty, but I failed to teach the difference between healthy support and unhealthy exploitation," Mom explained during our private conversation. "I thought I was creating a close-knit family, but I actually created a system where one person carried all the responsibility while others avoided accountability." Mom also reached out to Emma personally to apologize for her dismissive comments about their relationship and to acknowledge how her interference had damaged my ability to build healthy partnerships outside the family. She invited Emma to lunch later that week, where she planned to have an honest conversation about supporting my independence instead of undermining it. The extended family rallied around creating new dynamics that would support me instead of exploiting my helpful nature. Aunt Susan organized a family meeting where we established clear guidelines for how to handle future emergencies and financial requests, including requirements for involving multiple family members in decisions and providing advance notice instead of creating artificial urgency. Cousin Mark became an unexpected ally in recognizing manipulation tactics and offered to share responsibilities when legitimate family emergencies arose. He also revealed that several other relatives had been feeling guilty about not contributing more to family crises, not understanding that they were being deliberately excluded from participation while all pressure was placed on me. Uncle Robert established a family emergency fund that multiple people contributed to, monthly reducing the expectation that I would be the sole financial backup for family crises. He also volunteered to serve as a neutral mediator for future family conflicts, helping to ensure that requests for help were reasonable and fairly distributed among family members who could assist. Most importantly, I established clear boundaries with my family while maintaining loving relationships. I created a personal policy requiring 24 hours to consider any family requests, eliminating the pressure to make immediate decisions under emotional manipulation. I also insisted on honest communication about situations instead of manufactured emergencies designed to bypass my decision-making process. Emma and I moved forward in our relationship with a new understanding of healthy boundaries and mutual support. We decided to move in together after the new year, finally taking the step we'd both been ready for before the Christmas crisis interrupted our plans. Emma helped me recognize my own worth and supported my efforts to maintain appropriate limits with family members who'd previously exploited my generosity. Our relationship also benefited from Emma's willingness to understand my family dynamics while still expecting me to prioritize our partnership. She didn't demand that I cut off my family, but she did expect me to maintain boundaries that allowed our relationship to flourish without constant interference from manufactured crises. My relationship with the children evolved into something healthier and more intentional. Instead of being their emergency babysitter whenever Jessica wanted a break, I became a more deliberate uncle who planned special activities and spent quality time with them without feeling exploited. The children responded positively to this more balanced dynamic, and our relationships became more genuine and enjoyable for everyone involved. Jessica's relationship with her children also improved as she took full responsibility for her parenting duties, instead of constantly looking for ways to avoid them. She enrolled in parenting classes and started attending counseling to address the underlying stress and overwhelm that had led to her manipulation behavior. Jessica also began arranging proper childcare when she needed breaks, paying for services instead of exploiting family relationships. The experience taught me invaluable lessons about self-respect, healthy boundaries, and the difference between genuine love and emotional manipulation. I learned that enabling poor behavior in family members actually harms them by preventing growth and accountability while protecting my own well-being allows me to help others more effectively from a position of strength rather than resentment. I discovered that teaching people to treat me well ultimately strengthened my relationships and created a healthier family dynamic where everyone could thrive. My willingness to establish boundaries inspired other family members to examine their own patterns and make positive changes in how they related to each other. The greatest lesson was understanding that true family love involves mutual respect and consideration, not one-sided sacrifice. Real love doesn't require someone to consistently give up their own happiness goals and relationships to serve other people's convenience. Healthy families support each member's individual growth and independence rather than creating systems of dependence and guilt. I realized that my greatest gift to my family wasn't endless availability for their emergencies, but modeling self-respect and healthy boundaries that encouraged others to become more responsible, self-reliant, and genuinely caring people. By refusing to enable manipulation, I created space for authentic relationships based on mutual love and respect, rather than guilt and obligation. 6 months later, Emma and I were engaged and planning a wedding where my family would participate as honored guests rather than crisis creators. Jessica had developed genuine parenting confidence and rarely needed emergency assistance. Mom had learned to respect my boundaries while maintaining our close relationship. And I had finally learned that putting myself first sometimes was actually the most loving thing I could do for everyone involved. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where family members took advantage of your helpful nature? How do you balance loyalty to family with maintaining healthy boundaries in your own relationships? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories about overcoming family challenges and building healthier relationships. Don't forget to share this with anyone who might be struggling with similar family dynamics. Thank you for listening, and I hope this story helps you recognize your own worth and the importance of standing up for yourself when people try to take advantage of your kindness. Remember, true love never requires you to sacrifice your happiness or self-respect, and the people who truly care about you will support your efforts to build a healthy, independent life.